Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to the program Islam Explained, Theology Series Part 7. Today we'll be talking about a very important topic, and that is relating to God. Thank you for joining us again, Omar.
Thank you, Asa. Thank you for the invitation again.
Not a problem at all. Thank you for joining us. Now, if we were to ask the question, how do we relate to God, get to know Him better, how would you explain that to us?
Of course, this is one of the most important topics of theology, actually, relating to God. How do we as Muslims establish a relationship with God? And it's a very important topic, really, when you think about it. Now, as you know, from an Islamic theological perspective, we can never know the essence of God, which we call mahiyya. We can never know the essence of God. This is why Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, as you know, the Prophet's closest companion, he has a very famous statement. He says, Al-ajzu anil idraki idrakun, which means my inability to comprehend you is the best way of comprehending you. So God really cannot be known through His essence. In fact, God cannot be known through Nazariya. Nazariya means theoretical knowledge. So God cannot be known through theoretical knowledge. He can only be known through ubudiyya, worship. And of course, there's a system in Islamic theology which we call marifatullah, getting to know God through His names and attributes. That's the best way of getting to know God. And Islamic scholars also established the levels of getting to know God as well. And they said there are 3 different levels of proximity, closeness to God. And they are regarded as ilm al-yaqin, known or certainty through knowledge, ayn al-yaqin, certainty through observance, and then haqq al-yaqin, certainty through experience. And in an analogy, they say that if a person sees smoke coming out behind the hill, through knowledge they would say there is fire behind that hill. And if that person,
So that would be ilm al-yaqin.
that will be considered as ilm al-yaqin.
Okay.
And that's probably the position of us contemporary Muslims today.
Through knowledge.
We know Allah through knowledge. So if that person climbs that hill and gets to the top of that hill and actually sees the fire burning with his own eyes, then that would be considered as ayn al-yaqin, certainty through observance, through seeing. And if this person were to walk down the hill and go next to the fire itself and actually feel the heat and experience it on his body, then this would be considered as haqq al-yaqin. And haqq al-yaqin, the level of haqq al-yaqin, probably can be ascribed to the Prophet himself, alayhi salatu wasalam. As you know, he had a private audience with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with God, on the night of Miraj. So getting to know God can only occur, in a sense, through His names and attributes. And today I'm thinking of sort of focusing mainly on the attributes, some of the attributes.
Sure.
Perhaps later on in the future we can look at the names as well, divine names. As you know, there are 99 divine names, which we call Asma'ul Husna, the most beautiful names. In fact, some scholars regard Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala having more than 1,000 names. But those 99 were actually mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ himself in a hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah, all the 99 names. But we will look at the 9 names at another time,
Sure.
inshallah.
Sure.
I think these attributes, from a theological aqidah perspective, creed perspective, there are 14 attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. 6 of them we consider as transcendent attributes, something beyond physics, beyond matter, transcendent attributes. They are also called zati sifats or selbi sifats. And there are 6 of them. And then there's another set of attributes, 8 of them, which are called subuti sifats, or in English we can say affirmative or negating attributes. But we will look at the zati, personal sifats of Allah, or, as I said, selbi, transcendent sifats of Allah first. And through these attributes, we may get to know Him much better. And I'll begin with the first one, which is wujud. Now, in an Islamic sense, wujud, if you interpret it into English, it means existence. Now, we can say we exist too, but we exist because of him. The existence of God is not contingent, like our existence. Our existence depends on something external, but the existence of God does not depend on anything. His existence is not restricted by space-time. So his existence is self-sustained. He always existed. It is a necessary existence, unlike ours, which is contingent existence. So to understand God in that sense, we know that God exists and his existence is a necessity. He has to exist.
For us to exist.
For us to exist. If you look at on the other side of the coin, everything else in the universe or in existence, places that we do not even know, they exist as contingent objects or contingent beings. They can exist or not exist. Their existence is only a probability. But the existence of God, wujud, which is wajibul wujud, necessity existence, has to exist. God has to exist. That's the difference between the existence of rest of the creation and God's existence.
Sure.
So that is his first selbi transcendent attribute. His second transcendent attribute is also, it's good to point out that these transcendent attributes means the opposite of them cannot be attributed to God. Like, for example, existence, wujud, the opposite is non-existent. It cannot be attributed to God. The second one is baka. Baka means he always exists. He will always exist. There is no end to his existence. As you know, even time and space was created by him. So time has no relevance to God. It's his creation, and he can create it and end it as well. So there is no end to God. He is endless.
So with time, that started with the Big Bang. That's when scientists say that time actually started as well.
Yeah. According to research, that's what we know. Because for all we know, as from a scientific perspective, what existed before Big Bang, for us it's nothing. We do not know. We only know what we can measure or quantify by physics. So time actually, according to scientists, began with the Big Bang as well. So before the Big Bang, there was no such a concept of time. So we cannot say, how long has God been there? It's an illogical question. And that is his third attribute anyway, in the 6 sets of attributes, which is qadam. Qadam means beginningless. It does not have a beginning, because time is irrelevant to him anyway. God always existed. So that is his third attribute of transcendence, selbi sifat we say. And then we go to the fourth attribute, which is wahdaniyya. Wahdaniyya means oneness. God is one. And the concept of tawheed, oneness, is the most important concept in Islamic theology. There is nothing more important than wahdaniyya of God. He exists and he is one. What does this mean? What does wahdaniyya mean? It means he is not a one like the ones that we can think of, such as mathematical ones. He cannot be divided. God is not made up of components and parts. He is a one that cannot be added, subtracted, multiplied. He is a unique one. There is nothing like onto that one.
The one.
So the one. He is the one. So wahdaniyya is the concept of the oneness, unique oneness of God. And then we have the fifth attribute, selbi attribute, which is called muhallafatun lil hawadith. It's an interesting term. Muhallafatun lil hawadith means there is nothing like unto him. What that really means is we cannot compare anything to God. If we were to sort of brainstorm, push our intellectual capacity, we cannot imagine anything like God. We cannot. There's nothing to compare God with.
And I think the problem here is that as humans, we always try to compare something with something else.
Exactly. Because for us to comprehend things, we need to apply a thing called relativity. We have to relate it to something else, because we can identify, for example, long by short. Short, yeah, hot, cold, day, night.
Yeah.
You know, all of these things has a corresponding thing or an opposite to them. But God does not have an opposite or nothing that looks like.
Yeah,
him.
and that's why it might be a bit hard to actually understand, because we can't make
Exactly.
any comparisons.
Exactly,
with this.
and this is why Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said, "Al-ajzu anil idraki idrakun."
Yeah.
The best way of understanding God is not understanding Him, because we cannot know His essence. As I said, you cannot give a direction to God. You cannot say God is up there.
Yeah.
You cannot assign a space for God. You cannot assign a time for God. You cannot assign a location for God. Since that is the case, we cannot really understand His essence, ma here. We can never understand it. We cannot understand His being, that. However, we can only understand Him, as I said, through His attributes and names. And let me just address the last one too.
Sure.
The last one is qiyamu bi nafsi. This is a very important attribute as well, transcendent attribute. It means God is self-sustaining. He does not need external things to sustain Him. You know, like they give this example. If I were to ask you, I mentioned this before, what pulls the last wagon car on a train?
The one in front.
The one in front. And if we continue with that line of questioning, when we come to the locomotive, it will be illogical, irrational to ask what pulls the locomotive, because the locomotive is self-powered. So God creates everything, but He does not need created to be created. God sustains everything, every contingent being, but God is not contingent, so He is self-sustained. So what that means is, qiyamu bi nafsi, He does not need external support to exist. He always existed. He will always exist. He is one. There is nothing like unto Him, and He is self-sustained. So those are the six transcendent attributes of God. So investigating these attributes will allow believers to get closer and achieve proximity to God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we'll stop there.
Okay.
Maybe perhaps later on we can talk about the other 8 attributes in detail as well. So yeah.
Thank you for explaining those attributes.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us in this episode of Islam Explained. And next time we'll be talking about prophethood and the Prophet Muhammad. Thank you.